All right, let's just dive right into this one. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're actually going to skip our usual agenda today because we really need to jump straight into the deep end of literally one of the most baffling, high-stakes mysteries out there. We're talking about the 1996 Varginha UFO crashdown in Brazil. Now, officially, the military absolutely denies this ever happened. But as you're going to see, the physical documentation tells a totally different story. This isn't just your standard strange lights in the sky tale. Oh no. This is a massive, multi-witness event with international militaries, bizarre unknown toxins, and a trail of physical evidence that simply refuses to go away. Let's look at the sheer scale of what we're dealing with here. A 1,000-page Brazilian military report. Just picture that for a second. That is the size of a massive college textbook, entirely dedicated to detailing the response to an event that, officially, is just chalked up to, a misunderstanding and bad weather. A crash that supposedly doesn't exist, yet somehow required 1,000 pages of official paperwork. You don't write a 1,000-page report on a thunderstorm, right? This really hits the nail on the head regarding the tension at the center of the Varginha incident. The source material shows the military went to truly extraordinary lengths to document and allegedly conceal the whole shebang. So how did this actually kick off? Let's trace the timeline of that cold January night in 1996. What's really fascinating here is how fast and how international the response was. It all started when U.S. radar systems picked up a massive object entering the atmosphere. Our sources show the radar operators knew right away this wasn't a meteor, it was shaped like a ship, and it wasn't slowing down at all. It was just totally out of control. Within minutes, a frantic warning is beamed directly from the U.S. to the Brazilian military. Shortly after that, boom. The object violently impacts the Earth near Varginha, which is about 300 kilometers from Sao Paulo. And by morning, the Brazilian Army and Air Force are rushing in to lock down the site before civilians can get there. But, well, according to the accounts, they were just a little too late. Encounter 1, Carlos and the wreckage. Okay, so picture this. It's the morning of January 20th. Carlos, who actually happens to be a pilot, is just driving his truck toward the airport when he hears this bizarre noise. At first, he thinks his truck is breaking down, but then he realizes the noise isn't coming from the engine. It's coming from the sky. He looks up and sees this massive cigar-shaped object floating right above him, trailing this really unusual white smoke. Now remember, Carlos is a pilot. He knows exactly how this works. Standard aviation engines emit black smoke when they fail, not white. So he instantly knows this is not a normal aircraft. He watches it crash behind some nearby hills and races over on a dirt road. He's expecting to find a downed plane, right? Maybe pull some people out of the wreckage. Instead, he is hit by this overwhelming, suffocating smell of rotten eggs. It was so intense, it actually burned his eyes, and he had to pull his shirt up over his face just to breathe. Then, he picks up a piece of the wreckage. The source describes it as a feather-light metal. Listen to this. When he crushed it up in his fist and let it go, it didn't just drop to the ground. It floated down slowly, almost like Earth's gravity barely even affected it. Crazy, right? But Carlos wasn't alone out there for long. While he's standing there holding this impossible metal, military trucks absolutely swarm the area. Soldiers point rifles literally inches from Carlos's face and force him to run away. But the intimidation didn't stop at the crash site. Shortly after he gets away, a black car with 0 license plates speeds up right next to him. 2 men in black coats and glasses get out and deliver this chilling threat. "We know your name, your home, your wife, and your daughter. Forget what you saw." I mean, talk about terrifying. And this targeted intimidation completely worked. Carlos was so scared for his family's safety that he kept absolute silence about the whole thing for 26 years. But here's the kicker. While the military was out there securing the crash site, something had reportedly already escaped into the town. Encounter 2, the 3 girls. Meanwhile, back in the busy town of Varginha, police switchboards are just lighting up. People are frantically calling in about strange beings running through the woods and hiding up in the hills. And that brings us to a really pivotal moment. 3 young girls were taking a shortcut through a wooded path when they saw it. Huddled up against a wall in the tall grass was this 4-foot-tall, painfully thin creature. It had 3 very distinct horn-like bumps on its head, massive red eyes, and this shiny, oily brown skin. The source notes the creature looked visibly injured from the crash. But what makes this specific encounter so fascinating is the psychological impact it had. As the girls froze in sheer terror, the creature didn't attack them. Instead, the girls reported feeling like they could literally hear its thoughts. They described feeling a telepathic wave of just pure fear and pain, like an injured animal silently begging for help. Ultimately, though, the panic just took over, and the girls ran screaming all the way to their friend Katia's house. When the girls get there, totally breathless, they tell Katia's mother what they saw. And she bravely decides, you know what, I'm gonna go check this out myself. When she gets to the tall grass, the creature is gone. Now, at first, she thought the girls just made the whole thing up. But then she found undeniable physical evidence. Pressed right into the mud were these bizarre three-toed footprints that did not match any known animal in the area. And hanging heavily in the air, that exact same overwhelming stench of rotten eggs that Carlos had encountered miles away at the crash site. The stories were starting to connect, but the situation was about to turn deadly. Encounter 3. The tragic fate of Officer Marco. Now, the reports from Virginia aren't just about strange sightings. They are about fatal consequences. Let's walk through this really tragic escalation involving a 23-year-old military police officer named Marco Cherez. Officer Marco and his partner Eric were out on patrol when one of these creatures supposedly darted right across the road. Step 1, Marco leaps out of his vehicle and captures the creature with his bare hands. They rush it to the local hospital, where the creature reportedly dies pretty quickly. But step 2 is where the absolute horror begins for Marco. Just hours after touching this entity, Marco reports that his skin feels weirdly sticky, even though there's nothing on it, and that same rotten egg odor starts radiating from his own pores. Step 3, his health just rapidly collapses. Within 2 weeks, he's isolated in the ICU, fighting off an illness that the doctors simply cannot identify. And step 4, the tragic death of Officer Marco at just 23 years old with his whole life ahead of him. When the doctors analyzed Marco's blood post-mortem, they found something deeply unsettling. 8%. That was the concentration of a completely unknown, highly toxic substance coursing through his veins. According to the source documents, this substance did not match any known poisonous compound on Earth. And even more alarming, this unknown toxin was emitting a strange, localized radiation. Because of this inexplicable radiation and the unknown toxin, the medical authorities had to take extreme precautions. Officer Marco wasn't given a standard burial. He was actually sealed inside a special concrete box and buried in an unusually deep grave. This is a jarring detail, right? It perfectly illustrates that the authorities absolutely did not view this as just some standard infection. They treated Marco's remains like a severe biohazard. And sadly, Marco wouldn't be the only casualty. Testimonies suggest the military was quickly realizing they had a massive containment issue on their hands. The military lockdown and cover-up. So think about the situation here. You've got physical wreckage, injured entities wandering around a civilian town, and an officer dead from unknown toxins. The Brazilian military goes into full lockdown mode. The testimonies point to a massive, highly coordinated logistical operation. Firemen were actually called in to capture a second hiding creature using nets. And tragically, one of those firemen also later died from the exact same mysterious poison. Over at the local hospital, entire wings were completely cordoned off. The Army brought in a sealed black body bag and forced an X-ray technician to scan it. The technician noted that the room was dead silent, just filled with terrified military brass. The Army confiscated those X-rays instantly and threatened the technician with disappearance if he ever spoke a word about it. On top of that, over 50 hospital medical staff were forced to sign strict NDAs, told it was all just a military drill, and threatened with jail time. And what about the U.S. in all this? Well, sources claim U.S. Air Force planes arrived shortly after the crash, eventually taking off with large, sealed boxes, presumably flying the advanced technology and biological specimens back home for reverse engineering. But the cover-up wasn't just limited to the military. It extended right to the civilians. Months later, 4 men in black suits showed up at the home of Katya's mother, the woman who found the footprints, remember? They offered her a literal bag of cash. The one condition? She just had to go public and say the 3 girls had lied. Honestly, she was incredibly brave and refused the money. The men finally left, but not without issuing some heavy threats. This really shows the desperate, well-funded lengths authorities allegedly went to just to keep a lid on Virginia. The unsolved mystery. So you might be wondering, why does the 1996 Virginia incident remain one of the world's most fiercely debated mysteries even today? You know, we're seeing documentaries by filmmakers like James Fox and campaigns by doctors trying to exhume Officer Marco's body for modern testing. Well, it's because conflicting evidence just keeps emerging. On one hand, we have the famous 1996 testimony from the girls, a creature with oily brown skin, massive red eyes, and a bumpy head. But then, as reported in the source detailing events 30 years later, a Dr. Edel Eventuelli claims he was in that hospital and saw a live alien up close. His description? Completely different. He remembers white skin, light purple eyes, and a head shaped like a water drop. Now, this brilliantly illustrates the crux of the debate. Were there multiple distinct species on that crash ship, or is this just a classic case of human memory heavily distorting over the span of 3 decades?
And that brings us to the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves after reviewing all these reports. We've got a 1,000-page military report, dead police officers with unknown toxic radiation, coordinated hospital lockdowns, and remarkably consistent testimonies of intimidation. Yet the official stance remains zero public proof. So what do you think? Was the Virginia incident a genuine extraterrestrial crash that was brilliantly covered up by an international coalition? Or is it just a modern myth, a story born out of a terrible storm, tragic medical anomalies, misunderstandings, and a whole lot of spreading panic? The evidence is all laid out on the table. It's up to you to weigh that physical toll against the official silence. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive explainer, and as always, keep asking questions.